And that's all that's wanted, is that love is conveyed, that healing is conveyed, that it doesn't make anybody wrong in whatever it is that we believe, no matter how negative. The idea is not that we're wrong, it's just that we're suffering. And how lovely not to have to suffer anymore. Because in that inherent goodness inside of every single one of us is a tremendous power also. And you see the Pleiadians, Hanine and her crew, have tremendous power. They manipulate matter, space, and time. Where we're at now, we are manipulated by matter, space, and time. It seems that our lives are completely controlled by outer circumstances. And sometimes that's for the best, because we tend to misuse power because of our negativity, because of our doubt about our goodness and our doubt about our power. We tend to try to control other people or steal power from others. We don't know how to handle our lives very well. If you just look at our history and our current events, I don't think there could be any argument with that. We are technologically advanced, but spiritually we're rather retarded. And that's not an insult nor a put down. It's a compassionate statement that the two need to get equated, because it's obvious. I mean, even the movies and the literature and the art reflects that we could destroy ourselves. And the Pleiadian interest in that is not only compassion for us, but they don't want a hole in the universe in this section of the galaxy. That's happened before with disastrous results. Planets have blown up. Civilizations have blown themselves up with a misuse of their power. And we do have that potential, obviously, but I think we are past the point that that's a real danger. I think there has been a conscious option. We've seen so many movies where of nihilism, of destruction, of terror, of ugliness, and I think seeing that, acting it out in art, we've decided not to act it out in reality. And I think it's very important for every one of us to make a conscious and deliberate decision. I don't want to destroy this planet. I don't want to see this planet destroyed. In fact, I want to love this planet. Perhaps this is the point. I was going to save it to the end of this little monologue, but I think I'd like to share it with you now. It was back in 1980 that I think I sent out a signal to the universe that explains why these experiences have come to me. I did so want to serve, but I was so emotionally inadequate to the task from my own unhealed state, my self-pity and inadequacy and so forth. And yet there was the essential goodness in me was communicative enough with me to reach a conscious level and desire earnestly to serve this planet, to serve my family, humanity. And I came up with an affirmation in 1980, and it's this: in the name of the highest, I do bless and thank and love and heal and forgive and comfort and illumine this planet Earth and everything and everyone upon it. So even though I had really bad days of depression and anger and incompetence, nevertheless, I tried to say this every day and to put my heart into it and send out this blessing. And I do sincerely think now that that was the signal I sent out to those beings who want to do the same thing, who want to comfort and heal and illumine this planet. And that word forgive is in there, and that might be offensive to some. It's like, well, only God can forgive. But if we came from God, and if goodness is our inheritance from God, then we have that godlike power to try to forgive ourselves. And we must forgive ourselves. How can we proceed intelligently and happily if we're carrying around a great deal of grief and guilt about ourselves? We have to forgive it and go forward. and try to find new solutions. And we are doing that, and we can. So I sent out this message, and it attracted beings of the same wavelength, and I started having the experiences and started getting the music. And I think I started to make that point that music touches us on a level that bypasses intellectuality and analysis and begins the healing process for us. All the anger and the disappointment begins to rather dissolve under the impact of loving vibrations, such as music. So I do feel that the music that I've received and am becoming a little more competent in sharing is something that makes people, what obviously makes them feel better. They do say that quite often. And the ideas that I'm sharing, although they may be, I don't know, possibly alarming to some people because they're so different from the way we were raised, I never wish to alarm and I never wish to contradict. I do wish to share, and I do wish these ideas to be helpful. So I do hope they are received in that spirit. Haneen and her society, you see, they're not caught up in the struggle of everyday life because their thoughts can manifest into matter very quickly. And that's very exciting when you think about it, but it would be disastrous for us here at this stage of our development because, somebody even cuts in front of us in traffic and, we'd be committing murder if our thoughts manifested immediately. Pertaining to that, to cleaning up my act, to cleaning up my thoughts in preparation for this wonderful transition that we're about to undergo on Earth, I've had to substitute my usual thought processes with a little phrase that I'd like to share with you. When somebody cuts in front of me in traffic, well, the first thing I like to remember is, hey, they're just trying to get where they're going, like I am. And how many times have I cut in front of somebody, and I didn't mean them any harm, I'm just trying to get where I'm going. And so I try to give people always the benefit of the doubt that, hey, they're in a hurry, they're late, they're worried, they're anxious, they're trying to get where they're going. And anyway, if I put out all kinds of negative thoughts, it only really affects me at this point, because the negativity goes circulating through my body, through my heart, my bloodstream, my brain. I think this is why Jesus said, judge not lest you be judged. If you judge, you sit in it. You're the one that sits in the emanation that you just put out more than anybody else. More than anybody else experiences it. So I think that was just a wise little piece of advice there that we need to put into practical everyday use. And the little phrase is so simple that I have substituted for all the angry curses that I used to regularly express. The phrase is, love, love. It's not only love, it's love twice. It's love, love. So when people do things that annoy me and irritate me or aggravate me, instead of fouling up my own internal atmosphere with negativity, I try to say something quite positive, and love, love works for me. You could come up with your own phrase if you like, but I highly recommend substituting negative habits and sayings within with something positive and beautiful. And besides, I'm trying to send out a blessing too, because if they are in a hurry and they're aggravated and anxious and scared and so forth, they need love, they need support, they need encouragement. And I know that I'm receiving so much of that. I know that the earth, you and I and every single one of us, is receiving, if we could attune to it. If we weren't into negative habits, if we could attune to the tremendous amount of love and nourishment and forgiveness, yes, and comfort and healing that's being sent to us, we'd be transformed almost overnight. So I'm doing my little part by trying to remember, and I have to admit, sometimes my tone isn't perfect. I might say, love, love. to my kid, but at least the intent is there. And I'm trying to substitute love for, all those other things we tend to say. Haneen and her society lives like that. They manifest things through their thoughts, and since their thoughts are purified from fear and anger and anxiety, the things they manifest are beautiful. And they say that's what we're coming into. Isn't that exciting? I'm so happy about that. Well, where were we? Okay, I had the operation on my fingers. I played for people for the first time. But this was coming and going with me. I would be very certain of it, and then things would slow down and become normalized, and I'd fall back into my bad habits, and it was like I would need another experience to convince me. Well, they came up with a good one, let me tell you. I think it was Mother's Day of 1987. It was a cloudless, sunny, lovely spring day, and I was driving along in a borrowed car. I was having transportation difficulties at this disrupted time of my life. Disrupted, but always interesting. And I was driving along in a borrowed car, and I was listening to a cassette tape that somebody had sent me about a group that is purportedly in touch with UFOs. I was delighted to get this. I thought, oh good, somebody else is going through these weird things. So I was very happily listening to this tape, and it was of a man on a radio show who was explaining to people what he had experienced. And as he was on the radio show, he got suddenly very excited because he felt the presence of his contacts immediately above the radio station. And so his voice is rising, I don't know how many decibels, and he's going higher pitched and everything, and he was very excited. And all of a sudden, I don't know whether it was sympathetic vibration or not, but I felt the same way. I started feeling that electrical excitement and serenity, that paradox that I had felt previously when I was contacted. And it got to be so real to me that I actually rolled down the car window and I yelled up at the sky, "All right, you guys, I know you're here and I love you." And just then, on the tape, the man said, "Sometimes they give you physical signs." Well, just then, it began raining on the car. Rain? Out of a perfectly cloudless sky on a sunny day? It began raining harder. It began pelting and pounding on the car, and I switched on the windshield wipers, and position 1 wasn't good enough on the windshield wipers. I had to put them full blast, and they were swishing and wiping frantically, and this stuff is coming down harder and harder and harder. And it's not rain, it's some kind of sticky stuff. And it sounded like hail now, beating on the metal of the car with a rat-a-tat-tat like a snare drum. And I'm driving along, I can hardly see. The windshield wipers are flashing frantically. And then I noticed that nobody else on the highway is receiving this precipitation. Oh, I remember feeling so weird. I was mildly hysterical, laughing, crying. This was impossible. We're talking impossible that this car could be rained on from a cloudless sky and nobody else is being rained on. Meanwhile, not only is the car being pounded, but I'm being pelted with energy, just absolutely interpenetrated with an energy that made me so giddy that I think I'm halfway feeling it right now. Tremendously exciting. I got to my destination. I slammed the car in park and turned it off and ran it was the spiritual center that I described earlier, the yoga center. And I ran in there and I grabbed the woman who was the head of the center off the phone. She was on long distance to Los Angeles, I think, and I grabbed her off the phone. I'd never behaved like this before, and I said, "You've got to see this, you've got to see this." And I dragged her outside, and other people came, and everybody was standing around the car, and they looked at the car, and they looked at the sky, and they looked at the car, and their eyes were huge with disbelief.